Kutaki no Ha 第16番2005年12月16日Welcome to Kutaki no Ha, the podcast dedicated to the Bujinkan martial arts of Masaaki Hatsumi Soke and to the spirit of cooperation and friendship in the Bujinkan community. I'm Shawn, your host for the podcast. いやー、疲れたね。今朝7時で仕事をやりすぎて最近Kutaki no Haは出せないようになってるんだけど、まあこれからどうか頑張ります。よろしくお願いします。It's Friday, December 16th. It's 7 a.m. and I've just got home from an all-night shift at work. I've been doing a lot of night shift work recently, and that's the reason why this episode is coming out late. But it looks like I'm going to be getting some help on the shift soon, and my shifts will be not as long, and so I will have more time to sleep and to work on the podcast. So I hope to be putting them out back on a regular schedule of once a week from now on. It's hard to believe it's already been 2 weeks since DKMS finished, and this was supposed to be the kind of DKMS recap episode. So I'm going to have some thoughts about DKMS, and also Jeremy sent me in some thoughts that he recorded in audio format about his experience at DKMS, and also we had some feedback by email about DKMS as well. So we'll be sharing that with everyone in this episode. Before we do that, we'll have better Japanese and some poetry. But before that, there were just a couple of things that I wanted to mention about the Kutaki website. The Kutaki website, of course, is at kutaki.org, and that is the website around which this podcast centers, for those who don't know that. The number of which is probably 0. But anyway, when we upgraded the Kutaki software recently, there was a problem with the auto refresh that was supposed to happen when people log in and log out of the site. That problem has now been fixed, so thank you for your patience on that. If you have any other problems with it, please post in the forums. Another thing that changed recently is the recent replied topics block, which lists the most recent posts on the site and tells what forum they were in and how many replies and views they have and that kind of thing. Until recently, that block was kind of small. It only listed the last 5 posts, and it was on the right-hand side of the screen. And for me anyway, the site is quite active, so when I would come back after one day of not looking at the site, for example, there were more recent posts than 5, so I would not be able to see them all by looking at the recent replied topics block. So what I did was increase the number of posts that the block holds to 10, and also move the block itself into the middle of the page, which I think makes it easier for navigation purposes. I think a lot of people who are regular members of the site use that recent replied topics block a lot to kind of keep up on recent posts and things, so I think it's more convenient to have it in the middle at the top of the page. If anyone again has some feedback on this or has problems with it or likes it in a different place, again you can just post feedback on that in the appropriate forum on the website. For better Japanese, and today's phrase is お疲れ様です。お疲れ様です。 This phrase is hard to kind of put into an exact English phrase. Basically, it means like good job or you've worked hard, and it's often said to somebody or to a group of people at the end of the day when people are finished work, or at the end of say a dojo training session, or at the end of something where people have been making a lot of effort and doing work in some form or another, work, exercise, or effort. And basically, the phrase is the acknowledgement of the effort that the other person or persons have been making. And so often you'll hear when a Japanese person leaves the office for the day, they'll say like I'm leaving, and the other people will say to them as they leave, "Otsukare sama desu." This is also often said when people go out for a drink after work as well. A group from a company will go out to a pub or something, and when everyone's gathered and they've ordered the first drink, and they'll do their kampai, and often instead of saying kampai, they'll say "Otsukare sama desu," like an acknowledgement of the work that everyone has put in for the day. So if you're working in Japan at a new job, for example, or you have a chance to be in that environment where people are leaving for the day, you'll often hear "Otsukare sama desu," or the past tense form of the phrase, which would be "Otsukare sama deshita." Another appropriate place to use this term would be to your dojo mates or your teacher after class. Although to your teacher, you'd probably say thank you or arigatou gozaimasu or arigatou gozaimashita. But for example, if there was someone that was being the main uke for the class and they really took a beating, or just you could say the same thing to basically anyone else who was training in the class and putting in a lot of effort, and you wanted to just acknowledge that and say, good class, good job. After the class is over, you could say "Otsukare sama desu" or "Otsukare sama deshita." They're pretty much interchangeable. You don't have to worry too much about specifically using the present tense or the past tense. Both of them are pretty interchangeable in this situation. Okay, so let's give it a try. "Otsukare sama desu." "Otsukare sama desu." Okay, good job. Hopefully this section of the show is helping people with their Japanese skills even just a little bit, and maybe you get to try out some of the things that you hear on the podcast here when you come to Japan. It's starting to get really cold here in Japan these days, and a lot of people have their gas fan heaters on, their electric heaters on, and this type of thing, trying to stay warm. There has been some poetry posted in the poetry forum on Kutaki. The first poem that has to do with the season, perhaps, is called "Snow." It's posted by Bad Karma, and he posted quite a kind of philosophical, deep poem. And then the person who followed up to that posted kind of like a quick kind of haiku poem. I don't know. In the poetry forums, I kind of like it when there's one, like each poem has its own kind of thread, and then that thread is used to discuss the original poem that was used to start it, instead of people just posting poems after poems like right underneath each other. It kind of can be a bit disconnected and doesn't really leave much room for discussion, especially when the original poem is kind of cool, like I thought Bad Karma's poem was. I'm just going to read his poem for a second. The title again is "Snow." Falling from the sky, an amorphous mass of dipolar moments, links and bonds of crystalline matrices, form in an infinite array of linear vectors, similar in content, individual in form, spinning and falling in a frenetic dance against gravity, landing ever so soft to its temporary rest. Until the spring, the sun, molecular momentum, Brownian motion, hydrogen bonds cease to bind. Unchained from its terrestrial prison, it will achieve formlessness again, to achieve freedom, to travel on, to begin the journey again. So this poem really expresses a big aspect of the cycle of nature in snow as it falls and collects on the ground and then melts and turns to water. Barry followed up with a 3-line poem about snow, and then Jason Jikitsu made a follow-up to that with a kind of interesting play on words. So I just like to point out that because it's a little bit funny actually. Barry's original poem goes like this: Opened my eyes this morning, a blanket over all, everywhere white virgin snow. And Jason Jennings, Jikitsu, followed up with another line which used a play on the word snow in Japanese. And his post went, Opened my eyes this morning, a blanket over all, everywhere white virgin snow. Memory hibernating, a blanket over all, everywhere red silky clothes. I closed my eyes, a blanket over all. I can no longer see Yuki or snow. And of course, Jason's twisting the blanket aspect of the blanket of snow and turning it into a more, say, heated romantic environment, and using the play on words where Yuki in Japanese means snow, and Yuki can also be a Japanese female name as well. So, in Jason's mind, the blanket is not Yuki Snow, but the blanket is covering both he and Yuki, who are ostensibly together under the blanket. So that's Jason's take on the previous poem. That gave a bit of a chuckle in and of itself, but I feel bad for poor Bad Karma, who posted his great deep philosophical poem to start off the thread and then quickly had it degenerate into a pile of red silky clothes and a woman under a blanket in just 2 short posts. Well, keep trying, and hopefully the poetry section will gradually improve. Thanks, guys, for your submissions there. Okay, since this is the first episode back since Daikomyosai, since the seminar, I thought we'd make it our Daikomyosai recap episode. And in the last episode, episode 15, I asked for feedback from people who had been training at Daikomyosai, had maybe been to the seminar and seen and felt what was going on there and would have some feedback for us. I did get one person's feedback by email. Also, Jeremy Grease, Diamond Joe on Kutaki, sent me an audio file of his experience at Daikomyosai, so we'll be including that as well. But maybe we'll start with some of my own comments from my training there at Daikomyosai on the Tuesday and the Wednesday morning, which was the first day and a half of the 3 days. I wasn't able to participate all 3 days due to work, but I did get there for the first half. And my thoughts on Daikomyosai are those of maybe a typical kind of grumpy, disgruntled old man who doesn't have very much good to say about things. But anyway, that's why we'll put mine first, and we'll save the more positive sounding feedback for later. The Daikomyosai actually started off with a very nice presentation from the FBI. They presented Hatsumi Sensei with an award commemorating the years that he spent teaching FBI personnel in the U.S. During the years that he did Taikai seminars over there. They expressed a great gratitude for the things that he had taught them, and really stressed the fact that the things that he had been teaching FBI people in the U.S. had actually saved lives. And so the award was to express gratitude to Hatsumi Sensei for that. This was the point where everything, right at the beginning of the first day, for me and I think for a lot of other people, started to go very weird, because the presentation was made before any bow-in or anything while people were still kind of all scattered across the main room at Ayase, and people were watching the award presentation, and after the clapping had kind of died down, when that stopped, Hatsumi Sensei just grabbed someone and started to train, like have them attack him and do a technique. There was no bow in, there was no kind of pause there, and I think it kind of took a lot of people off guard, including myself. And he had them attack him, and then he did a variation of Koku. And as we know, Koku is the first technique of Gyokoryu, and we started off doing that in January, and we've been repeating it many, many, many times all through the year in Japan, and so that was the first technique we worked on. Hatsumi Sensei was focusing on the Joryaku no Maki, the first third of Gyokoryu on the first day, and the Churyaku no Maki, the second section of Gyokoryu on the second day, Wednesday, and the Geiryaku no Maki, the third section of Gyokoryu on the third day, Thursday. And so the first technique, of course, was Koku. And after Hatsumi Sensei had demonstrated it with the uke a couple of times, he called someone else up from the crowd to demonstrate it. And what the person did was like nothing like Koku. And I was thinking like, come on, this is the first most basic technique of Gyokoryu, which was this year's theme, and we've been doing this all year, and we've been working on it, and kind of like, where have you been kind of thing. And so I was kind of surprised that this very high-ranking individual did not seem to know what was going on. But then Hatsumi Sensei after that called up another person, and this person was a Japanese person, and they did not do Koku either. They did like a completely different technique when Hatsumi Sensei clearly asked for Koku. So I was thinking like, what's going on here? It's just really weird. And like Hatsumi Sensei asked for Koku like 5 or 6 times, and 5 or 6 times that's not what was done. So I was just thinking like, is there something weird in the air here or what? And that's pretty much how things continued for the first day, from what I could see. One good thing that I did think was that Hatsumi Sensei seemed to spend less time having other people get up and do techniques than he has done at previous seminars, Daikomyosai seminars that I've been to. He seemed to spend a decent amount of time actually teaching and doing stuff himself, instead of just kind of calling people up to show off and stuff, which was a relief to me actually. But the people that did get up and do demos, a lot of times there didn't seem to be a clear connection with what they did and what we had been working on. From what I could see, we would be taking a basic technique from Gyokoryu, and then Sensei would do a bit of a henka on it, a variation of it, but then when he would call a person up to demonstrate, it didn't, to me anyway, seem very connected to what Sensei had been doing. And it seemed like, so many people just wound up doing the same kind of basic, like generic Bujinkan takedown throw kind of thing to finish off, and everyone was kind of finishing the same way, and it wasn't what Sensei had done. And some people performed really well and did some impressive stuff that looked really good, but at the same time it seemed like in those cases they were working within their own parameters and doing kind of like their own technique, rather than like, it didn't really seem to reflect what Sensei had just been showing. And so I was kind of a bit confused by what people seemed to be doing, and I've kind of wondered what other people were seeing and thinking and this kind of thing. It was a bit baffling to me. Another thing that, again, I'm being quite negative here, but another thing that I found kind of annoying was that when Sensei would do things, of course, as often happens at Taikai, and as often happens at Daikomyosai, and sometimes at Hombu as well, when there are a lot of visitors, is that as soon as Hatsumi Sensei does a technique, and sometimes even before he's actually finished the technique, a certain section of the crowd will like break into this big round of applause, and then everyone else kind of feels like, oh, everyone's clapping, I should clap too, and then everyone starts clapping, and all of a sudden you've got a room full of clapping people, and Hatsumi Sensei actually hasn't even finished the technique yet, and a couple of times at Daikomusai, Hatsumi Sensei had just finished the technique, and he'd actually started to talk and say something, but he was just drowned out by this big round of applause, and then he actually didn't continue with what he was going to say because he was interrupted by the clapping. And there was one case where he kind of put out his hands to kind of motion for people to bring down the volume of the clapping a bit, but it just kind of continued, and so he just kind of stepped back and just completely changed and went to something else rather than speaking. And from what it looked like, it looked like he was going to make some kind of verbal elaboration on the technique and maybe say something about what he had just done. But because of everyone clapping, he was just interrupted, and we didn't get to hear him teach us about what he had just done. So I think in those kind of situations that the clapping is actually kind of rude. I mean, Japanese people don't clap as a traditional part of their social thing. I mean, especially in the dojo, it's really not a traditional Japanese thing to clap when the teacher does a technique. That is like something that people are importing and bringing with them from a Western cultural perspective. But I think that when we're in the dojo with Sensei and when he's teaching us, we should be aware of what we're bringing to the dojo, and that sometimes those things are not natural or native for the Japanese people, and it can actually make them feel uncomfortable. And we should kind of put aside at the door the things that we bring with us from our cultures and from our countries, and really be open to the way that the Japanese do things, because we're in Japan. And that can, I mean, we can kind of shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes when it comes to training if we bring too much with us and don't leave a lot of that kind of thing at the door of the dojo. So I just felt kind of weird about all the clapping and this kind of thing. I felt it was a bit annoying, actually, to be blunt. See, I told you I was going to sound like a cranky old man, and now you believe me. Well, I wasn't just kind of disappointed with how little other people seem to be picking things up. I do hold those same standards up to myself. And especially the second day, I really realized how much I wasn't getting and how much I need to work on my own Budo too. And then, I was thinking, if I'd been called up to demo, would I have done any better than the people I was being critical of? I mean, on the second day, then I started to be just as critical of myself, because as soon as Hatsumi Sensei would do something, and I would turn around to my training partner and go to start the technique, and I would only be able to get like the first or second thing, and then I would just be drawing blanks, and it was just really bad. And a lot of people seem to be having the same kind of problem. And at one point, Sensei kind of said, if you can't do this kind of thing, then you can't call yourself a budoka. And that just really hit me because, there's so many people that like to label themselves with the term like budoka or ninja, and you see it on people's websites and you see it on people's business cards. But I mean, can we really do it? Can we really put our money where our mouth is and walk the walk? I mean, Sensei obviously holds the term budoka very highly. Can we live up to that? Is everyone who practices martial arts a budoka, or is there a standard? How do we define the term? Is it just anybody who walks into a dojo and starts flailing around? I mean, Sensei often uses the term in a very high way, and I get the feeling that he reserves that term for people on kind of like a very kind of like semi-legendary level, like Musashi or some other kind of famous historical martial artists. And I mean, are we really at the level? Are we really at that level where we can really call ourselves true martial artists and true budoka? And so the second day, I was kind of I was depressed at my own kind of inability and the inability of everyone, and kind of the level of the Bujinkan that I was seeing, including myself along with everyone else. And at the same time, I was just greatly impressed with how far we all are from the bar which Sensei is setting for us, and how much work we all have to do if we're really to become true martial artists, as Hatsumi Sensei obviously wants us to become. And so I really went home on the train after the morning session on Wednesday, really kind of with my head kind of hanging a bit low, and shaking my head at myself and the whole kind of scene, with really kind of impressed with how much work that we really have to do, and how much work there is still before us in the Bujinkan if we're to live up to the kind of footprints and the kind of standard that's being set ahead of us by a martial artist of the caliber of Hatsumi Sensei. We often hear Hatsumi Sensei say, "Oh, the Bujinkan's okay, no more need to worry," and he'll tell somebody at Hombu, "Oh, don't worry, your country's fine," or he'll tell a person, "Don't worry, you're getting really good." And Hatsumi Sensei says things like this, but I think not that we shouldn't believe him, but there are times when we should take what he says with a grain of salt. And if he's telling us how great we are, we can't take that so seriously that we slack off. And whether he's saying that to us as an individual, or whether he's saying that to us as the whole Bujinkan community, I think that we will really be fooling ourselves if we think that we are at any kind of place where we can stop, where we've kind of arrived and we don't have to work hard. I mean, we really have to put in a lot of hard work in our training as individuals, and also in just the Bujinkan community itself, before we can really get up to the level I think that Hatsumi Sensei is at, and obviously wants us to be at. So I guess that's how you could sum up my feelings about Daikomyosai, that we really, really have a long way to go, and we really, really have a lot of work to do before we can seriously call ourselves real martial artists. So that's it from me. Here's Jeremy with his thoughts on Daikomyosai.
Hey there, this is Jeremy Grease, and I was fortunate enough to spend the first day at Daikomyosai 2005, which is starting on November 29th, and will go also today and tomorrow, December 1st being the last day. And it's a 3-day training festival in celebration of Dr. Masaaki Hatsumi's birthday. This year he will be 74. And the theme this year, as many well know, is Gyoko Ryu. And so basically on the first day we went through the Joryaku no Maki, which is the first set of techniques from Gyoko Ryu. And we started out in the morning with Koku, and then we moved on to Rennyo, and then we also touched on Danshu and Danshi, and then later on in the afternoon session we also did many attacks and defenses against attacks from grabs from behind. So there was an attack from behind with a sword, a grab and thrust with a sword, and there was a double armed grab from behind, like a bear hug kind of attack. And then we also did the full Nelson defense. And also, after being shown those techniques and practicing them with our partners, Hatsumi Soke came and showed some different variations as well as counters for all of those attacks as well. And what I found really interesting about the first day of Daikomyosai was, in the beginning of the morning session, many Shihan came out fully dressed in armor, and it was just awesome. They did techniques from Gyoko Ryu completely dressed in armor, armed with swords and everything, and it was really awesome to see them, going at each other with all this heavy gear on, and also taking Ukemi, which was amazing. And that was really good. They did attacks with multiple attackers, and just awesome stuff. So, and we also saw two Shihan dressed as like dignitaries with with old style kimonos that had very long legs, like 1 meter long pant legs and long sleeves, and so it was very difficult for them to move freely as we normally would today. And Hatsumi Soke was mentioning that it was important in these times to learn how to fight in these types of clothing, because of course dignitaries and people like that wore them and able to prohibit them from fighting when they were at meetings and whatnot. So they had to be able to adapt to their environment, which was also the theme going along with everyone training there, because there were more than 200 people, and the dojo was quite large, but there was limited space. So you also had to adapt to your environment, much like you do at the Hombu dojo as well, where there's many people and you have to be careful of your surroundings and hope that that everyone can train safely and no one gets injured. And so those are my observations on what went on. And also there was a new book was released. There was an advanced copy being sold. It's called Japanese Sword Fighting, and it's called Secrets of the Samurai. And Hatsumi Soke released this new book, and it's going to be in stores soon, so we were able to see a sneak preview of it at the Daikomyo-sai yesterday. Unfortunately, I have to work, so I cannot make the second 2 days, but obviously many people can, and I wish them good training and enjoyment through the festival. So thanks very much for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.
This is Podgy from Podgy's Tokyo Talk, and you are listening to Kutaki no Ha, the podcast all about Kutaki, I think. And it's ha, but that's not a funny ha-ha, that's a wave ha-ha. The wave of Kutaki. Listen, if you're a martial artist and you're interested. If you're not interested and you're not a martial artist, don't listen to it. Listen to me, Podgy, Tokyo Talk. Bye.
Now it's time for our mailbag section. We got some mail feedback, and the first piece of mail feedback that we have is from Tony Notariani, originally of Great Britain, now in other parts of the world, such as the US. His mail goes like this: Happy belated birthday. I'm still listening to the podcasts and have even taken time... Blah. I am still listening to the podcasts and have even taken the time to vote. Seeing the number of votes made me realize that my vote really does count, so I hope others who listen can spend the few minutes to do the same. I noticed a strange thing though in the last 3 episodes, where the volume appears to jump up and down a bit during playback between sound clips. Not a lot, but worth checking out. I really enjoyed the Daikomyo-sai. I thought that it was the best seminar with Hatsumi Soke that I have ever attended. Overall, I can only talk of 2 Taikai and last year's Daikomyo-sai, but nevertheless, for the first time, I felt like I had a slight conception of what we were doing. I don't know if it was the great training partners, the atmosphere, or the way we were being taught. It may simply be that I got used to this type of event. Whichever it is, I had a great time and met a lot of great people. I feel I absolutely have to go back again soon. Hopefully one day I will get a chance to approach Sensei directly and tell him how much I enjoy his teaching. So thanks a lot for the email. We really do appreciate people's votes, as you mentioned, that you voted. Thanks for voting. You can vote for the Kutaki podcast at podcastalley.com and do a search for Kutaki and give a vote and a comment there. There will also be a direct link to the Kutaki section at podcastalley.com in the show notes that I'll post for this episode on the kutaki.org website. About the weird volume fluctuations, there very well could have been. I'm not an audio expert, but am trying my best, and hopefully all I can say is that hopefully things will continue improving as I get used to ironing out the different volume adjustments and things like that. Also, thanks a lot for your feedback on the Daikomyo-sai seminar. It's really good to have a different perspective, and I'm glad to hear that someone enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. Our next piece of mail is from Mats Brickman from Sweden. Hi Shawn, Mats Brickman here. We met at Kaigosuru this year. I just want to thank you for the podcasts and say that I really enjoy listening to them on my MP3 player when I'm out walking with my 1-year-old son. It's great to get information about what's going on in Japan at the moment. I'm looking forward to hear the Daikomyo-sai episode. I have some small suggestions for upcoming episodes. Reflections from training, stuff you train, things Soke says at training, and so on. Bujinkan history, differences and similarities between the 9 schools. Perhaps an interview with one of the Japanese Shihans. Mats goes on to mention that this year is his 20th year in the Bujinkan, so congratulations on your 20-year training anniversary in the Bujinkan, and we look forward to having you in the Bujinkan for 20 more. Hopefully we'll still all be training at that time. Regarding your suggestions, as far as reflections from training and things like this go, and also as well as Bujinkan history, I am really hoping to get someone else to do that kind of thing. Maybe someone to come on and regularly every episode have a slot that they can do on Bujinkan history, or do a book review or a Bujinkan like DVD review or something. Maybe have more different people come on who will give reflections from training here in Japan. That should be possible. An interview with a Japanese Shihan might be difficult, but we'll see if we can maybe arrange something in the new year. It would probably depend on the particular Shihan as well as the subject that he would be talking about. So the whole internet thing is a bit of a delicate subject with a lot of the Shihan, so that will have to be kind of approached very carefully, but we'll see what we can do in the new year. But thanks very much for your feedback and suggestions. Our next mail feedback is from another Swede, Maria, who actually just moved to Japan to study in university. Her mail says, "Hi Shawn, I just wanted to drop you a line and tell you that your podcast rules." Yes! Keep up the good work, and I look forward to the next episode. By the way, congratulations on your new iPod. Thanks very much. Actually, I'm really enjoying my iPod on my train commutes. I'm subscribed to a few different podcasts actually, and the new iPod gives me a chance to listen to them. As well, I've looked around on the net and discovered that you can actually burn DVD images to view on the iPod. So I've taken a couple of the Bujinkan DVDs that I own and converted them so that I can watch them on my iPod as well. The batteries die really quickly when you're watching video on the video iPod, but it is pretty cool to watch like a Bujinkan Daikomusai seminar or one of the other DVDs on the iPod. I feel like such a techno geek. Thanks for your mail. That does it for the email feedback that I got back from episode 15. Again, if you would like to send some feedback, comments, suggestions, a shout out, something you'd like me to read on the show, an audio comment, you can send that in various audio formats and I can do the conversion. I can play it, put it into the podcast. The address to send those to is podcast@kutaki.org. And once again, please give me your vote at podcastalley.com. If you are sitting here at your desk, listening to this podcast, you're probably online if you're playing it on iTunes or your browser, and you can probably just switch to your browser and just type in podcastalley.com, and before you know it, you'll be voting. I think it's a good idea. Why not try it? Time has really flown by for this 16th episode of Kutaki no Ha. Thanks for listening. I'm going to sign off now and leave you to it. It's been a bit of a long episode, but thanks for listening once again, and see you online at the kutaki.org website. Have a nice day. Bye.